So sorry guys for that June 2015, but before flying here, one of my employers has the amazing idea to drop alpha vodka bottles on my MacBook, so it fried everything. So we're going to use the one on SlideShare. So it's a little bit different what you heard the whole day and yesterday. What I'm going to explain to you here is probably your pitch to your boss on why you should move to microservices. And we found a lot of correlation between the industrial revolution and now. So I believe everyone studied in high school and the college the industrial revolution, the first one, the second one, and we all believe that history, it repeats itself. So what happened there, it's happening now in software. So that's going to be your pitch. This at least is my pitch to my mom when she's going to ask, what are you doing? So a little bit about us. I'm the founder and CEO of Mesh Ape. We're based in San Francisco, and we have an office in Canada, and we're going to have one in London next month as well. We probably build the largest marketplace for APIs, and we also have other tools. We probably know us because of this, which it's running around 150,000 developers. If you want to sell or buy APIs, you come through that. We open source Kong, which is not any other API management solution, but it's free, open source, and based on Nginx. And this month is going to cross 200,000 downloads. And then we have APIanalytics.com, which is like Google Analytics for APIs. So you plug in and you visualize all your API traffic very easily. Now, start with self-promoting. We go with this. So if you see about it, this is the picture I always show because that's how hardware became accessible to everyone. That's how the world you see out there, it started from here with electricity as well. But if you think about it, electricity there can be cloud computing now, where you turn it on and off. And the assembly line is APIs, where you pick up the piece you want and you build your software faster, better, and cheaper that goes everywhere, in a car, in a fridge, in a mobile. So that was 1901. It's actually Henry Ford perfected it, and he made Henry Ford. He made the Ford in 1906, but it was invented in 1901. He just made a commercial success. What else is happening? It's happening in the division of labor. So you all come from finance, so you all know about Adam Smith. But before, you had like one engineer doing mainframe. And you had this big engineer doing mainframe. And now, after 40, 50 years of software and hardware, you have decoupling the skills. So API engineer, it didn't exist in every job. No one was hiring API engineers 10 years ago. Now you just go, I don't know, on a AWS job page, and they're hiring 400 of them each quarter. So that's what's going to happen, is that everything is changing and decoupling little hyper-focused skills for each engineer. So before you had one guy do everything, and now you're decoupling. You will see more. You are obviously API developer evangelist. You have API backend engineer, the front end that consume the APIs from the backend. DevOps is becoming a huge market to monitor. We sponsor APIdays since I think the first day you did it. We were like 20 guys in a room, and we grow with them. And but another big conference to go is obviously AWS reInvent, and there are like 18,000 this year. Last year was 14,000. 18,000 DevOps right there. In Vegas in about 3 weeks. So that didn't exist 10 years ago either. Because of cloud and everything, there was the need of DevOps. Now DevOps, it's a weird skill because they get hired, but then they buy tools to automate their own job. So they really don't want to work. But maybe they're smart and they get paid a lot for that. So that's an interesting skill set that is growing, quite frankly, very fast. So what most of the software is running on those kind of architecture. Your banks, everything is running on this. 90% is running on this, even 99. We're very far to be an API-centric world. What it means is that everything is a big silo. Like you used to have a big mainframe in the hardware industry, or you used everything, one guy doing all the components when you were building cars before Henry Ford. And this is a big problem because if one of those components break, everything else break. So obviously, it has some advantage too. You can build it faster, but long term is going to be a disaster. So where the world is moving, and that's, again, is not decoupling, in each part of those is actually a standalone components. If that component goes down, it doesn't affect the whole application. So I tried to explain this to my mom, and I came out with this. So use Facebook, and I say, well, Facebook has a lot of feature set. Let's say messages is one feature. Consider that messages inside Facebook is a microservices. So if that microservice is buggy, your engineer sucks, you can, no problem, that thing goes down, but Facebook photo sharing is still up, and your mom can see the pictures. So that's why it's so important, because 100% is your app, 1% goes down, the other 99% is still working. So that's why we're moving to this. That's one of the main reasons. There are others, but this is the main reason that everyone should know, because it doesn't break the whole thing. Everything's standalone. And in this case, this is a marketplace example where you have, the billing part, you have the inventory, you have the shipping, and everything's a standalone entity. Most of those now are APIs, internal or external. Maybe, some companies don't want to build this inside and hire 20 engineers, so they use an API. There is a Symphony Commerce. It's a good company, around 200 people in Silicon Valley, and if you want to build a marketplace, you don't want to do the Amazon kind of shipping technology, and so you use their API and they do all the shipping technology and inventory around your products. So that is an API that you can use from a third party. You don't have to build those components in-house, or at least all of them. So what is this thing, microservices APIs? So there are two different things. So the microservice architecture is the architecture. The APIs is the way microservices communicate to each other. So API is the door that access each house or each functionality, each component. And they're not going anywhere. You see, this year probably you see big buzz on microservices keep growing, but APIs are not going anywhere because they still have to talk to each other. And the way they do this is through APIs. And on top of that, you build your mobile, your apps, and this is how software now gets delivered. Now, another big history change. So we had this assembly line pretty much manual for the first 70, 80 years. Then the enterprise resource planning came in on top. And what it did, it put automation on top of the assembly line. So all these developers or people that I showed you before, they don't exist anymore. It's all automated through robots, and you just go in a car manufacturing industry, and that's where you see what's going on. There's no more people. It's only, everything is automatic, and there is a software behind. So what's happening now in software is the same. We start to decouple everything. We start to have the assembly line. And now each of those, if you think about it, this is from Wikipedia, what an ERP is, mainly used in car industry and now everywhere. But each of those components you can find also in the API space. So search, that's Elasticsearch. Analytics, you need analytics to manage and monitor your APIs. The management, the portal. So all these things that exist in the hardware industry since 20, 25 years, is going to be applied again, once again, in the software industry. And each of those, it's a company, there are many startups solving each of those pieces, trying to automate better and faster the assembly line of software. So this is what you see now. There's no more people. That's what's happening in software as well. And DevOps are actually pushing this forward very, very, very fast. You used to have hardware and mainframe. Now you have everything in the cloud. You don't need anymore a technician or a hardware engineer to do that because Amazon does that for you. And so you see also automation in software. How many of you knows Docker? Okay. And how many of you knows CoreOS? Okay, 1/10 of what it was supposed to be Docker. So Docker is it's been published in 2013 around March. And no other project like that grew so fast. It's the fastest ever project or open source or software tools that humans have ever seen, which over 30 million downloads. What it did, it made that automation more possible, easier, faster, more efficient. That's why, and very, very easy to use. So no more VMware complicated things. Just Docker start, Docker stop, it's done. What it does, it decouple everything in containers. And what happened in containers, it's just automation of shippings. Before you had each one with your own shapes, and then it was very hard to unload and offload boats, and it wasn't working. So what happened at CoreOS, it's a competitor as well. What they all do, they're moving the revolution forward, automation. And what happened is this. Now this arrived around 80s, 70s, late 70s. Before, I don't know if you remember, there were no containers around the world. And it was just everyone has his own thing. And this actually, there is one of the most favorite books from Bill Gates is called Box. And it just talked about how this really changed the world as much as the assembly line. And it really did, because you wouldn't get shipping a car that decreased even more the cost of that car. And it moves the global evolution much faster. So everything is decoupled, software is moving decoupled, but there's always one thing that is centralized. And in this software world of API-centric, that thing in the container world is the crane, come, offload, put on trains. That is part of the container revolution. In the API space is the API gateway. That's the centralized piece they always want to put on top to move containers around. And that's actually what you will need if you need to an API-centric architecture. There's no way you can escape from that unless you build monolithic piece inside the container, then you're going to end up like the first monolithic piece. We probably heard a lot about authentication, security, rate limiting, transformation, all these things you don't want to put in the code, you move up to the API gateway. So that's, Amazon just announced one 2 months ago, but they were using that internally for many years. I don't know why they did that late. Kong is the open source API gateway, and then behind you they have all commercial API gateway offering. Sometimes call it API proxy, API layer. So modern architectures, I don't know, you can't see that very well, but this is your mobile app, and those are all the services, and you ended up writing common logic in each of those services. Why you're doing that? Why you're paying engineer 120K to write things here, 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 and most of the times they're in different technology, so you need to add different skill, and when you deploy here, you need to deploy here, you need to deploy here, you need to deploy there. It's going to be a mess. So where is the world is moving to this, where you have everything in one gateway. And so then from that, you can route this one through this one to that, this one just this. So everything's going to be added here, and then you route. And the only common functionality, not the actual IP or the logic. So that's where the world is going. One gateway to orchestrate common functionality across services. And who's doing that? Well, there are many enterprises that are moving quite fast. Netflix is one of the biggest examples. Everything is API-centric, everything is microservices, API gateway. It's all built in-house. They used to have to buy API commercial management commercial solution, but they do all in-house now. They have a lot of engineers. Sometimes they process 25% of the United States internet traffic. So 25% of United States internet traffic. No one does that. And what they do is sold through API calls. So what's happening is just API calls, concurrent, millions of API calls at the moment. You can see github.com/Netflix. They have a lot of cool open source projects to check out. And they did this. They were all monolithic. In 2012, they did the transition. So it's possible from a big company to move from monolithic to microservices very fast if the management, the CEO, the executive want to do that. It's possible. If they don't care, it's not going to happen. And Facebook, obviously, all the startups in Silicon Valley that are quite big now, they use these architectures as well. But I like Netflix because it was whole, and it moved, actually did a transition. And so as I said before, not all the APIs you need to build in-house. Now there is a service for everything. There is even APIs that ship you T-shirt, that send you coffee. So this is just an example of different services, from language translation through SMS, machine learnings, delivery mails. This one delivery mails, mail delivery, all backend as a service. So from very specific things like payments to bigger thing like backend as a service that does 90% of what you do, what you need when you build a mobile apps. And there are more and more. There are a couple thousand in the world. Someone fails, but some becomes very big, like Twilio, which is going to IPO anytime soon. PubNub is used a lot in finance. And obviously, Amazon Web Services, $7 billion in revenue, all through their APIs on a business that didn't exist 7 years ago, and profits are quite high. Now, if your boss or whoever doesn't buy the Industrial Revolution thing, you should talk about popcorns. And the reason why you should talk about popcorns is because it also happening if you start to look around. Like when you go out, let's start to look around and see how many things have been affected by this decoupling thing, not just software, but not just hardware, but even food. So what's happened is that you have all these pieces that you were like they were not connected. So you go in a market, and basically what you do, you buy there, then you go in another. You go around for 20 minutes. Where is the salt? You go another 40 minutes. Where is the butter to do the thing? What happened is that they decouple all of this in a microservices, but everything is tied in. They don't use APIs anymore, but they use like that. So everything is a microservices, and they're all very tied in together, ready to run. Or it can be containers in the Docker world. So that's how also you see other economies going through this once again. And the more you go around, you can get any example that that's what happened and what's happening in software. So that's a new cool thing, right? You keep reading about microservices. Very nice. It's very cool. It's so modern. Never heard it before. Well, actually, it says since 3,000 years ago, because what this guy said, it was actually happening now. We humans usually tend to arrive a little bit later of things happening in the past, or they forget. But we always go around in circles, like we do in many things. And in software, after 60 years of circles, we're going back to 2,300 years ago. And I'm a big believer that history repeats itself. So what you see around is actually happening now in software. And that's why banks and everyone else is moving through decoupling and decoupling even more. Obviously, you need to start from somewhere. You can do Netflix. That was amazing, done in 2 years. But you can start by moving peace, decoupler, RESTful APIs. What they do, I mean, we are from San Francisco. So what we see from like Bank of America, JP Morgan, it's Chase, is that when they build the mobile apps in the last 3-4 years, that's all new piece of code, all API-centric that deliver functionality to their mobile application, which obviously run on legacy software and COBOL. But on top, it's a HTTP layer, simple, and that communicate with mobile applications. So they started from there, and then the iPad and other services consuming APIs. And from there, you will see going down slowly and change all the architecture underneath. It would probably take 5 to 20 years to get there, but it would be done till the last COBOL engineer would be fine. And so that's pretty much my talk, I guess. Yeah, so thank you guys. If you have any question from the audience, whoa. Thank you. So 1, 2.
Short question. At the end, you are saying that the banks are doing that, and that's true. But the thing that the feeling that I have after these 2 days is, will it be early enough? Will it be on time that the bank had made that transition? If it takes 5 to 20 years, what's your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. The problem with bank is that they don't put upfront technology or efficiency. They put upfront security. And number one thing is security, and second thing is probably policies, government, law, compliance, rules, different states. So, but the number one thing is security, and I understand that. So this is a very, very complex vertical to attack around APIs and microservices, and it has to take that time because you don't want to fuck it up 40 million customer credit cards. So it's pretty much the way you should do in banks, but I only understand this in banks, maybe hospitals, some governments. They're moving quite fast in US, but not all the others. So he has to take 20 years, because if they do it tomorrow, they're actually going to do wrong, and then it's going to, you can put out of business an entire bank if you do it wrong. Like, I don't know, you open an API and there is no security on top. So it takes time. Also, banks are built on millions and millions of lines of code over years of software, and most of these lines of code are like running from a guy that wrote that line or that piece of code in 1970. No one want to touch it, so they keep it like there, since someone has the courage to actually touch that COBOL piece. So it takes time because it's all about security, and when is security and also policy and government, it obviously takes more time. I don't think would be late. For what can happen, and it's sometimes happening, is that getting disrupting in verticals. So in the case of bank, there is Stripe, there is Square. They're attacking different verticals of the bank ecosystem. Now Square doing like leasing and loans for small businesses. So now you don't go anymore to Bank of America. You just go to Square. You already use the Square reader. You need a 30 grants to furnish better your bar, you just go to Square. So they are actually, or TransferWise, for transfer money. So the startups are attacking little piece of banks. So eventually those banks are going to buy them at a very high price, or they're going to lose their vertical. So there is a risk that they're going to be drastically downsides, but that's a risk of every industry going to an API-centric, because it's something you can't not avoid. It's like the assembly line. You have people putting things wheel, now you have robots. So it will happen no matter, it's not about if, it's not going to be when. So, but it's an interesting vertical because of security is the #1 thing, not technology.
Yeah, just a quick question. You're saying about microservices and decentralization. Aren't API gateways and these API management things, isn't that just another monolith? And isn't the lesson that we're learning that actually we shouldn't centralize all of these functions, all of these features, some of which we probably won't use and are therefore going to be security vulnerabilities, into one central thing, and rather we should distribute around the responsibilities of that layer? Yeah,
that's a question that we get a lot, like in terms of architecture, like you want to decouple everything. But as I said before, there is one, like if you go in, you have the boat, you have the container, but you can't move the port and the cranes. That's just a centralized place. Like when the boats come from China with different 150 containers, they always go to Auckland to offload those containers, and they go out from Auckland. So there is always a centralized place that you can move, and it doesn't make sense to move. So 99%, like you do payments, you do shipping, that's, 100% decentralized. But it doesn't make sense to write boring common logic like authentication, rate limiting in each of those things. It's just not worth the time. So you move them up in the API gateway layer. That's how Amazon, everyone runs. But only that piece, only the crane, not everything else. Everything else can be moved. But that one can be moved. Auckland, like London, like there's a boat. The port is there. You can't move that. It would make no sense, but only for that specific part, which is not a lot. It's the main usually case are Chu and other 20 boring authentication system, rate limiting, billing for charging, transformations, that can be a big one, analytics, monitoring, logging. But there are like 20, 25 main features that you're just going to put it there. All your other 55 microservices are going to be Decouple. I mean, our company, we manage 15,000 microservices. We're gonna do a blog post on StackShare today or next week. So how we do that, technically speaking. So everything is Decouple, 15,000, but the gateway is not. Other question?
Yeah, I have one for you.
As always.
Yeah, always. If someone take it, I will offer you, but thank you. Now, one question, because like having this mainframe application, these monolithic applications, it's sometimes really stable, it works, and maintenance can be really low on things. But if you decouple too much, like you have to management of all these services can be really time consuming, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the best way to like balance between things that like this should be centralized in cranes, and what should be decoupled into microservices? You remember this article about monolith versus microservices, when the guy say build a big monolith and decouple little by little to know exactly where your architecture should be decoupled. Because if you decouple too much on the theory, you may have to manage too much your stack.
So the question is premature decoupling may be a problem. So the first two answers. The first one is that's why DevOps are growing out, because they automate the process of the foundation. So no matter you have 10 microservices or 10,000, he does the job, and he's trying to write code or buy tools to automate that and scale, no matter how many they are. That's why they're getting more powerful every year. And the second one, actually, most of the startups in Silicon Valley, they build this at first because they don't know what to decouple. Maybe the authentication is something you want to decouple since day one, like logging user, because that you will need it anyhow. But most of the other is everything in one, and you go all the way up very, very fast, because you may need a pivot in 1 year, and if you already have decouple, it's going to be a problem. So you go all the way out, and then, okay, this one is working, this one is working, this one is a failure, and then these two that are already working scaling, boom, we start to decouple. But then the others, maybe we need to change the product, so we don't need those anymore. We don't need to decouple them. So it's true that 90% of the startups just build all a monolithic Ruby or Node. And then later on, when they're sure it's working, they're going to start to decouple. It's always happens later. It never happens like, oh, day one, write of code, API gateway. That's always comes later.
Yeah. And do you also decouple management? Like, for example, the teams that are behind each microservice, do you decouple their objective? Like they do analytics, they do only analytics, and they don't kind of care about what others. They just try to do the best analytics. Or do you think it has to be under like global management? Like, do you also decouple this management layer?
So, by give an example, they're decoupled by technology and by team as well, but we don't want people to stay in silos with knowledge. So, for example, last week, the one engineer touched the analytics product, Galileo, and then he touched Shape ID, which is the centralized authentication microservices, to fix a problem, and then he touched the marketplace. So he touched 3 different things in 1 week. What we do is rotation sometimes, so the knowledge is not only in that team with, I don't know, 5 people, and then the other 5 people just consume RESTful, but they don't know what's going on. So it's the Decouple what we do rotation to share knowledge once in a while.
Okay. Yeah, like really like the Industrial Revolution, where they were making like rotation to improve each task and everything.
We're all going to be out of jobs, basically.
Yeah. The last job, yeah. My boss will be an API, right? So thank you, Augusto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.